When doing anything with my girlfriend, people have to put the word romantic in front of it. Romantic meal, romantic walk in the park, romantic trips away. These romantic trips see us in cities across the world.
I'm Olivia, Chris's girlfriend. The last trip that we went on was to Venice for my birthday, and it was somewhere that neither of us had been to before and completely different to anywhere else we'd been previously. We saw the Bridge of Sighs, which is a bridge that prisoners crossed from the courthouse to the final destination of jail, and it's a very small bridge which I don't think you would maybe not normally notice, but it's got a tiny little window in it, and the prisoners would cross over the bridge, and looking out the window would be their last glimpse of freedom before they were trapped forever. We didn't go especially to see the bridge, but it was something that a lot of people were interested in and having pictures with, including us.
That wasn't the first time we found ourselves visiting somewhere with a morbid connection attached to it. There's a real pull to these places for me, and it's something that I can't really explain. This morbid fascination is within us all. What is it exactly that we are looking for? What void are we hoping to fill by doing this? There's a name for this type of thing.
So my name's Dr. Ria Dunkley. I'm a lecturer in Geography, Environment and Sustainability at the University of Glasgow. Dark tourism involved visiting sites of death and atrocity, broadly defined but confined to the past 100 years, so within living memory of existence. So they started the beginning of dark tourism with the sinking of the Titanic. So the reason they did that was they said that actually for something to be classified as a dark tourism site, it had to be within the living memory of the people who were affected by it.
This was a former house of correction, then became a courthouse and a police station, and then it was a disaster recovery unit for an insurance company called Ecclesiastical, and then we moved here in 2003 and opened it in 2004 as the Crime Through Time collection, Little Dean Jail. Dark tourism, the real deal. But this is some of the material that we have on display that gives insight into the 25 Cromwell Street property and the story that lies behind it.
Fred and Rose West were a married couple who raped, tortured and murdered up to 12 people at 25 Cromwell Street, Gloucester, where the victims were buried in the basement and the garden of the house.
Again, in terms of provenance, some people can say, well, that can't be Fred's, or that can't come from Cromwell Street, but I got it. So I know the provenance is 10,000%. I was in the Cromwell Street property, and I won't tell you how I got access to it, but it was no, I can't say too much on that because
I won't.
But these items here, for example, Chet Atkins, that's an LP. You'll see two LPs there, and Rose West has actually put her name on there. The reason she put her name on there was that record belonged to her, or these albums belonged to her, and they were in a box, and should have took more really, but I only took those mainly because they had the signature on. It's Fred West working boots. There's his tools. There's his plastering tools. There's some bricks from Cromwell Street. There's some whips and cudgels that were used by the West for their perverted sexual exploit. Thus, the spade and fork that was in the cellar at Cromwell Street, which I took out myself.
Well, originally I'm from London, and I moved here end of 1998, 99 for work reasons. And all I really knew about Gloucester was, the nursery rhyme of Dr. Foster stepping in a puddle and Fred West, and that's about the only two things. First thing I did was go out and buy the book on the subject and get some background there. And by the time I'd moved here, the house had been demolished, so there wasn't anything actually to see. But just the curiosity of coming here and seeing where everything took place, and the fact that this was a just a normal street, and you know, these were horrific crimes committed by somebody who's well known in the area. It was just fascinating to me. I think obviously they knocked it down because it was such a big story. There was so much suffering and death there, and it was going to attract interest and people who wanted to come and have a look, which they were trying to avoid. You know, it's a very residential area, and if you're a neighbour and you're involved in any way, or you were here at the time, you're probably sick to, well, I say sick to death, but that would be the wrong, the wrong term, of the constant interest.
You are? You're taking pictures of where the serial killer used to live? Well, it's a bit sick if you are.
The people that lived in Cromwell Street, they've had a tough life themselves, and you know, they had to face the media, and you know, Cromwell Street's known all over the world now as being the home of Fred and Rose West.
It's odd to be here because I know this is such a famous place and stuff, and I've seen it in so many pictures and on the news, but I just feel it's kind of like being in a graveyard full of people I don't know. Just I've got no connection to it really.
Dark tourism or thanatourism tends to turn conventional tourism on its head, i.e. it's not about pleasure seeking ultimately, or it doesn't seem to be so, though some people would argue it perhaps is, in terms of it's a morbid curiosity and fascination with death.
My view on dark tourism is that generally it covers so many areas of interest, and people's fascination with crime, sleaze, scandal, debauchery, celebrity deaths, you know, it goes on and on and on.
The media certainly has put that case forward very strongly when they look at very sensational, emotive topics like people taking detours on bus trips to go and see sites where people have been murdered or people have been killed in the aftermath of issues. So that's where most of the controversy and the ethical issues surround dark tourism, is this idea of it being something sinister and indeed people seeking pleasure out of other people's suffering.
In 1966, Aberfan in South Wales saw one of the biggest mining disasters in British history. A mining spoil heap dumped on a mountain overlooking Aberfan slid into the village, crushing everything in its path. A farm, houses, and a school full of children. 28 adults and 116 children were killed.
I came here one day and there was a bus trip. They were some company from Scotland, and they were touring around. I think they were staying in Cardiff. And one of their excursions was to come here. People come here from all around the world. Everybody knows about Aberfan, one way or another. Of course, all the wall then started cracking, and we could hear all the cracking of the timbers and the dust, and the next thing then, whoosh, all this slurry come from somewhere. But then, it was like seconds, it was like total quiet, if you get what I mean. And we could hear all this noise, but nobody was thinking, we were stunned, what was going on? Next thing we could hear all people crying and screaming and shouting. And that house by there is that house by there.
All right, I see.
So can you see where we're standing by now?
I can, yeah.
This is one of the windows that I came out of.
All right.
So you can see how close I was to it.
Yeah.
Right? So where we are standing now, exactly where we are standing, is roughly where that digger is by there. This is where I was.
How do you feel standing here now?
Got the hairs in the back of my neck.
Yeah?
The hairs are standing on the back of my neck now. Not shivering, but it just brings back memories, doesn't it?
And now people take pictures on their mobile phones, same as the Westminster tragedy recently, and you know, get in touch with the newspapers and how much do you want to pay me for this, because this other newspaper paid me this.
Have a little bit of respect as well. I know we got cameras here all the time, people are filming like we are now, different things, but a selfie in my mind is a type of show-off sort of type thing, innit?
See, I would say that's disrespectful to do a selfie there in places like that.
I would say there's elements of immorality involved, but overriding that is human interest and the stories that we can learn from it. So no, to me, I don't have a problem with it being immoral. If someone directly involved with a murder story or a situation was being affected, then I would think twice, about my involvement.
So when you hear things like that about those young people taking their lives in Bridgend, it's very difficult to justify why a tour would be a beneficial thing, apart from the kind of financial aspect that's obviously being gained through doing something like that.
Between the years of 2007 and 2012, small Welsh town Bridgend saw a high number of suicides of young people in the area. This grabbed the attention of the media. Bridgend resident Urek aims to capitalise on this.
Don't get the number plate in.
So what is it you're doing here?
Taking this bus around all the tourists. They can see the sights. People, they come here and I will show them places and the stories. The people want that, I will give to them.
So how do you feel about making money from a tragedy?
People with money will pay for anything. Tourists, they go crazy. They want.
And people do want. We visit these sites all over the world, often going out of our way completely to go and stand where something awful happened.
It's something that a lot of people want to come and see now. And I know my sister-in-law, she's from, as I say, I live in the UK, but she lives in South Africa still. And she's come over to visit and she wanted to especially come and see this.
There's no real outside perspective for this to seem as odd as it is. Poking around these places on your own or paying to go on some kind of tour is okay because somewhere in us all, we justify it to ourselves.
If you were doing a tour specifically just to make money out of a murder site, then, if it was recent, I would, be concerned about that. But I think people would still do it.
People might say I profiteer from being open as a visitor attraction, but there's no money in this industry, I can assure you that, because whatever you get on your door, you basically pay your bills and buy exhibit items.
When you break it down in all of those kind of different kinds of sites, you then realise that you need to look at the motives of people within the context of those different kinds of sites, because they vary hugely.
But even with Aberfan, I think it's one of those sites, if you visit, which I've not visited Aberfan myself, because again the story in itself and what happened, the tragedy, I mean, stuff like that, I don't mind admitting it. I mean, it hurts, just the thought of it, little kids dying from that, and yeah, makes me feel sad now. Actually,
Yeah.
I think it makes everybody feel sad.
Yeah.
But again, it happened, and all the people of Wales. Well, and again, I think from around the globe, there was lots and lots of support there, wasn't there, for the Aberfan disaster, and I think people that visit that site, it's a solemn visit. It's not like visiting something like this where a lot of it's very tongue in cheek and sort of murderabilia, memorabilia, or whatever. But sites like those, whether they be deemed to be dark tourism sites, it's a solemn, heart-rendering site to visit.
In the case of visiting a cemetery, it can be something that people actually seeking to contemplate life and death and make sense of death in a sort of contemplative space, which cemeteries can provide that for people, and can provide a sense of solace in terms of this sense of that something continues even though individually we die.
A short distance from the school in Aberfan is the graveyard, which has a dedicated space for all the victims of the tragedy.
The graveyard in particular has really put the memorial garden into perspective for me. It's put faces to the name, I guess. You can really identify with what went on there by all these graves, all these...
Or rather names to the numbers.
People seem to be here as dark tourists rather than mourning friends, family or whatever, and they are behaving as they would in any graveyard.
These sites are a holiday to us, a safe insight into a tragedy. This curiosity is inherent.
Would you consider us dark tourists?
If it means that I'm a dark tourist because I find it interesting, then yes.
And again, without crime, there is no economy. Fact.